All right, so what were we talking about?
Last thing we talked about was gym workouts.
No, no, no. Come on, man. That's not what we were talking about before.
What were we talking about before? I forgot.
So I believe you were talking about how women are the way that they are because of how society, makes them.
Right, right. Yes, I remember now. It's all coming back to me. Basically, what I was pertaining to wasn't something that's exclusively targeted towards women or young women, but more of a young person problem, as imposed by different environmental circumstances, more predominantly the education system. I forgot how many years ago, but there was a documentary that I saw, and it was basically talking about the university slash college industrial complex and how they compared idealistic students before they attended university versus people who were still relatively young in their 30s in the workforce, and the extreme differences in what they how they viewed the world, whereas students basically thought that they would go out, hit the ground running, and become a great success as a result of going through the university process, whereas the adults realized on the other side that the university process, more specifically the implications of the degree and the degree itself, actually didn't do all that much to contribute to the current level of success they had, if any, and that they would have actually been more successful sooner had they bypassed the university system altogether. And I use that as an example, more like a metaphor to explain how the question then becomes, are young people more susceptible to making slightly worse decisions or bad decisions because they're inherently young and are prone to make questionable decisions, which there is a degree of truth in that, versus how much of the bad decisions are made, or the regrettable decisions, how much of the regrettable decisions are made as a result of misdirection, bad information, and just being misguided by a system that teaches them something that actually isn't as important as they led us to believe it was. I think it's both of those. I think it's a combination of misdirection by a system and being young and naive, where the two of them together to young people often lead to the reason why young people make questionable decisions at a younger time. That when you ask them later in life, 30s, 40s, 50s, what have you, they typically say, "Oh, if I could go back and change this, I wouldn't have done this, or I wouldn't have dated this person, or I wouldn't have gone here, or I wouldn't have worked there." And so I find it interesting that on the one hand, as a expression, as a phrase, we tell each other, don't think about it, don't overthink, it's too much information. And then when we find ourselves in a less than desirable situation, we say, man, I should have thought of this more, or if only somebody had told me. The implication is that if they were told information, which is paradoxically the thing that they said that they shouldn't use too much of or be stunted by, it would have led them to avoid the very problem they're complaining about in the first place. And you can't have it both. You can't simultaneously say that less information is more, pull the trigger, and then also say, in the age of information, in the age of AI, in the age of data centers, in the age of every quantifiable metric of data, from your geolocation to your breathing, your sleep habits, your purchase history, where you're, I mean, everything in between is more relevant now than ever. So I think those two concepts live in direct opposition to each other. I live that there is an extremely polar opposite dichotomy there. And I think that we tell each other things with good intentions, good intended, ideas to help each other find meaning and easy pathways to conceptualize, making decisions towards success. But I think we oversimplify the words and the concepts that we use so we can make something incredibly complex more manageable and understandable.
Hmm.
And therefore, we throw out the actual really important complexities of the topics in question. So it's confusing. It's a lot. Um, we were speaking about young people and making questionable decisions with specific reference in regard to the simple understanding that is it possible to understand enough so that moving forward you can move forward with not exactly but an approximate um, foresight, the way they say hindsight is 2020. Can it be close? Can it be possible to move forward with a almost 2020 foresight? And of course, the answer is no. It's not going to be exact because all 2020 hindsight is documenting things that already happened. There's no guesswork. It's there. You know, it was photographed, it was videotaped, recorded, analyzed, documented
Hmm.
in the past.
Yeah.
Foresight opens itself to any number of freak variables that cannot be accounted for, or basically, I mean, yeah, that encompasses everything. It just variables that cannot be accounted for. You try to control everything, and then by complete happenstance, I don't know, you try to buy an apartment or a house or something, and you dot your I's and cross all your T's. You think about it for 6 years. You make an Excel spreadsheet. You document it. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. And then the day you go to buy it, you call ahead of time to confirm it's still available. And then you get there, and it just so happened that it was purchased by I don't know, a movie company because they wanted to rent it out for a movie scene that they're about to shoot, and nobody told you, and even the property management company didn't know about it. But this movie company's here, and now that building, or that car, or whatever, is not for sale anymore. Some variable. That was a bad example, but you get what I'm saying. That's actually happened in the past when you look at how a lot of movies were made. They had to rent temporarily, block off entire sections of the city and geography, roads, what have you. Nobody was informed. Nobody thought it would happen that day. So can it be possible to move forward with enough foresight that you can basically make as close to a guarantee about your personal future as possible? I think it can be done if we understand objective reality well enough. That's open to debate, of course, but then again, they said that we wouldn't have robots, and here we are in the age of AI almost overnight.
So, so I think it's going to be difficult because I would assume that you're referencing a person who is going through the system is going to look at themselves in the world objectively and navigate. Is that what you're referencing? But
A person, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
A person navigating through the world is operating with the information that they're exposed to, and they have no choice but to work with the information they have. And
Mhm.
it isn't completely obvious which information is truthful and which, if you were being misled, would you be able to recognize that? If you were to ask first of all, we have to start with simple principles. Is the fact that we can acknowledge that people can be misled, which is obviously yes. Can you be misled by institutions? The answer is obviously yes. So if any of these given institutions that control any aspect of your life were deceiving you intentionally with intentful purpose, would you be able to recognize that? Most people would say yes. And then if you ask them, give them a situation whereby which they had to point one out, they wouldn't be able to, let alone explain it. Um, so we have to navigate the world with what we have, but that doesn't mean that any given person at any given time understands all of, if not at least many of the ways in which they were easily being lied to. Because if you had an option to be lied to or not be lied to, or to avoid the thing that was deceiving you, why wouldn't you avoid it? But yet we fall victim to it every day on a daily basis in mass. And then when we try to tell people about it, more than oftentimes people actually are in denial and they say, no, that's not true, but they can't tell you why. Or they say, if it was a lie or if I was being deceived, I would know about it. Would you? How would you know? Do you know what to look for? Is it an intelligence problem or a perception problem?
I think
And
it's
the
a
question is
humility
that it's
problem.
basically, it is a humility problem. I agree. It's massively a humility problem. It takes a big person, and I mean this metaphorically,
Mhm.
uh, to basically say, I believed in this for 10, 5, 15, 20 years. And then, let's say, for the sake of the argument, definitive, conclusive information came out that it was, in fact, not true. It takes a big person to say, I was lied to, I was deceived. Instead, what they do is they deflect, they don't want to talk about it, they change the topic, they try to explain themselves. Just say that you were lied to because Once you own the fact that you were lied to and you were deceived, you can say, okay, um, we can put that to the side. We can leave this alone. I can make peace with what happened. How do I move forward from here with earnest and honest intent to correct course, change course,
Hmm.
and look at the objective, true information, or at least make an attempt to try and find out the truth and then use the truth, if found, to improve and better your life.
Yeah.
And many people in the age of AI and deepfakes and computer scamming and graphic design tools that are more powerful than people's ability, oftentimes, to differentiate uh, fantasy from reality, are at an all-time high. So that's a very tall thing. I remember it
Hmm.
was a video one time on Instagram Short, and this is a very viral video, had millions of views, and it's actually hilarious, and it's also simultaneously scary because it's a testimony of how a precedent was set, that there is a demographic of people that cannot seem to tell, in certain circumstances, reality from fantasy. And it was basically a video of this grandmother, and she was watching a really large, I think it was like a UHD 4K TV, and the someone in her family in the room was playing Grand Theft Auto 5, and they were driving the car, and they switched the camera from third person display to that cinematic display that
Hmm. Yeah,
changes its perspective every 5 seconds.
when you're like jumping over ramps or some stuff like that.
Exactly, exactly. You hold the button, I think it's the circle button, and then the camera changes perspectives to different wide angle
Oh
shots,
yeah, yeah,
tire shot, front shot, back shot.
yeah.
And then they did that, and they told the grandmother, "Hey, look at the news, look at the news, look at the news." And then they just started running over pedestrians,
Hmm.
and
Wow.
the grandmother just flipped out, and she's like, "Oh my, I can't believe this is," like, she went into shock. She's like, "People can't drive. That is insane."
Hmm.
I don't know what's more
Yo,
shocking, the fact that she thought it was real,
GTA.
or she.
So
Go ahead.
GTA 5 doesn't even look that realistic on in hindsight. You know what I mean?
It doesn't. It
Yeah,
doesn't. But then again, we grew up as gamers. We know what to look for.
yeah.
That's my point. Is that they don't know what to look for. If you were being deceived, would you be able to recognize that? In her particular case, no.
Hmm.
What was more? I don't know what was more shocking, was the
Yo,
fact that she thought it was real.
you you reminded me of when I was playing Black Ops 1 back in 2010. My father thought that graphics are so real. I'm dead serious.
Well, no, I believe that. It makes me think about Jordan Peterson when he said, uh, "Everything has significant meaning when you compare something to something else." It's like, you are tall compared to what? Because compared to what, you can either be really small or really short. Like, compared to a giraffe, I'm short.
Yeah.
Compared to a dog, I'm really tall. It's like, relative to what? Another thought exercise is, if you had all 21 million Bitcoin in a flash drive, you'd be the richest man in the crypto space. You go to an island in the middle of freaking the ocean with 400 miles of ocean in every direction. I believe it's called Point Nemo,
Hmm.
and nobody had any snowball's chance in hell of a prayer of being able to find out where you were, and you were stuck there. You would sell that flash drive or give it away for one can of tuna fish. It's all perspective, it's all relative. So, compared to the video games from the 80s, Atari, the Nintendo Entertainment System, the 1990s, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the ColecoVision, Black Ops 1 2010, running on a 360 PS3, 60 frames per second, 1080 p. Yeah, yeah, it's going to look way more realistic compared to their time.
Hmm.
The same way Black Ops 1 now looks absolutely archaic and obsolete compared to something like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4,
Yeah.
running on a baseline $3,000 PC. You cannot compare the two. It is night and day. And it's going to be even better when the PlayStation 6 comes. And we're just going to keep. I mean, even now we already have games with
So
photorealistic graphics that are, yeah,
so before you go on to another topic, I do want to go back to the humility thing about people looking
yep,
objectively at themselves and being introspective. So I do want to give them some slack because if you're a medical student or a
mm-hmm,
doctor or you become a doctor, that's all your 20s down the drain. Like I can
right,
see you justifying all those years in your mind. Like there's
right,
no way, you can fully let go of that. It's just not human to
right,
do that.
right. Yes, and that is true, but there is a silver lining,
Hmm.
and there's a few different ways that this can be addressed. The silver lining is, it may not necessarily be all that time down the drain, because after all, assuming you made it, You have a career, you have a profession, you're making money.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily all for naught. Nobody goes to 20, nobody attends 20 years of school because they woke up when they were 7 years old and they said, I really want to attend school for 20 years for free. That's my life's purpose. No, you go to have a piece of paper that says you are now good enough and qualified per this institution to make money here. We do it for the money. The other thing with that is there's no reason, assuming they grew up in a traditional mainstream upbringing, to believe that there's anything inherently wrong with the medical system.
Hmm.
After all, doctors are respected, nurses are respected. You're a doctor. The father of the girl you're interested in doesn't even necessarily want to know your first name. He's just like, oh, he's a doctor? Sure. Come
Yeah.
meet the family.
Yeah.
Like, you have basically instant approval.
Yeah.
Um, but if you were to ask people, do you know what you're fully getting yourself into? They would say, oh, absolutely. Ask them again. Do you? Now there's a kernel of doubt. What do you mean? Do you really know what you're getting yourself into? Well, what do you mean? Tell me about the medical industry. First of all, most of them wouldn't be able to because they don't necessarily have to as a prerequisite to get into medical school or become a doctor. But if you actually study history, there is a narrative that has yet to be disproven, which basically shows that medicine was a very different thing about 150 years ago. Something happened around the early 1900s that has been documented, and I'll keep it simple, that basically suggests that medicine was very different compared to what it is now. Its perceptions were different, the way people handled it were different, the whole cultural zeitgeist around medicine was different. Now, I'll be the first one to say that doctors in medicine today, well, let me rephrase it. I'll be the first one to say that the medical industry is very beneficial in certain circumstances. You need emergency surgery, a doctor is going to save your life. You need surgery to remove this, doctor is going to do it to save your life. You need a car accident, bleeding, doctor in a surgical ward is going to save your life. But we have to understand how the medical industry operates in and of itself. It is an aspect, a sector within the monetary system whose sole purpose above all else, like other systems and businesses, is to survive by making money. You don't make money in a business by creating a perfect product because you'll sell it once and then you'll never sell it again. You put yourself out of business. It's happened to hundreds of businesses. They learned that the hard way. Why would the medical industry be any different? What does the medical industry represent? This was basically made mainstream in a documentary called Zeitgeist 2007, where they disclosed that the purpose of the medical system is to represent sick and dying people. So the more sick and dying you basically have, the better it is for business. So if you cure that, there are multiple billion-dollar industries that go down the drain. Point being, back then, medicine was actually holistic, less than it before it was pharmaceutical.
Hmm.
The narrative is that under the Rockefeller influence, they decided to inject billions of dollars, 3.5 billion, to subvert the education and medicinal industry so that they can get the general public to associate medicine with pharmaceuticals and holistic medicine as quackery. And this is corroborated by one of his quotes where he basically says, and I'm going to paraphrase this, it's almost going to be a verbatim, but it's going to be close enough where he basically goes, we will not erect amongst the populace scholars or academics or attorneys or lawyers. We do not want thinkers. We do not want business of men of integrity or of logic. We want obedient workers. I want a nation of workers. And this was also exasperated by George Carlin in a stand-up bit where he basically goes, they want a nation of people that are just smart enough to run the machines and just dumb enough to not know about a system that threw them overboard 30 effing years ago. This was back in like the early 2000s. And so if you think about it, if that's true, that means that we have inherited a system by which we have no reference of what it was before, and therefore no reason to question what it is until you start noticing things in the industry. And many doctors and many nurses have, and they were faced with a dilemma and two choices. Either you stay knowing what you know and collect your money, or leave. And in fact, there was a very famous viral video recently of a young guy who talked about getting his residency, attending, I think it was MIT, became a doctor. He learned about certain things. He learned, in his words, not mine, that essentially being a doctor is not curing the problem, it's treating the symptoms. It's like the analogy he gave is basically imagine you have a leaky pipe in your house, and the leaky pipe is ruining your wall and making it moist, and ruining the wall and knocking it down, crumbling it bit by bit. Instead of fixing the source, which is the leaky pipe, you just knock down the wall and just build a brand new wall, but not actually fix the pipe. And that basically tracks with how you would have to do it to survive under a monetary system. This is nothing new. It's just that a lot of people uh, are in denial about that. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to be honest with the possibility that it could be true or how it would be true. They don't want to think because it's more convenient not to do so, because it puts you in a position of having to make a decision. But his answer to his realization was he decided to go off grid. Imagine being an accredited academic surrounded by other smart people,
Hmm.
peers, institutions, and then
Yeah.
having such a crisis of conscience that you decide to go
Yeah.
off the grid.
Yeah. Well, that tells me he's a good person. That hard.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that that's a good indicator. But my point is that we have to understand. It has to be understood the complete and absolute, and I mean this word in a different technical sense when I say awesome size and scale of the extent that they were willing to go through to socially engineer people exactly where they wanted them, such that they had no idea that it was even happening. And so I forgot who said this, but of course it'll probably be brought in the comment section by someone who will Google it.
Yeah.
And
Well, don't
it
worry,
was
man. We're not getting views like that yet. My last one got 20 views. So we're not gonna
I
worry
have a
about any
feeling
of the comments.
I have a feeling this one's going to go a little bit differently. Uh, we have to give the people. See, I already messed it up. The people have to be presented with a conspiracy so vast that they would seriously doubt its ability to actually be true. Something like that. It was the conspiracy and the deception and the sophistication of this great project has to be so large that to even begin to question it, to even begin to even attempt to see through it,
Hmm.
in and of itself becomes a monumental undertaking to try to wrap your head around. And that's why they made it as big as they did. That's why it's not a multi-year thing. It's not a multi-decade thing. It is at the very minimum a multi-generational thing. The rest of us people at the bottom have no choice but to improvise, adapt, and overcome. Why? Because we have to. We have to make money.
Hmm.
So that is the reason why some people deserve to be understood and be given grace for being frustrated or not knowing, but it's the same thing with a certain event that happened around the world roughly 6 years ago, where the entire planet basically, changed, where everybody was basically voluntold
Hmm.
to, let's say, stay indoors. It was a very interesting time because you saw the collapse of the authority PhD. I have a title next to my name. I know what I'm talking about. Narrative, where you had accredited person arguing against accredited person, coming at the same argument or the same topic from very, very different positions, leaving the general public to question, well, which one is the truth, which one is it not? And so, that being said, it's like, okay, um, that just goes to show that the people that were looking for the experts to tell them what reality was were discovering that the experts couldn't even agree on what reality was. Not because they didn't necessarily know what reality was, it was because there these two extremely polar opposite narratives in collision with each other. And the question became, where did they come from and why? Ask yourself that question, find out where does that lead.
Hmm.
And so in the age of TikTok and distractions and Netflix at home, it's easier to just not think
Yeah.
than it is to actually look at it, because what do
Yeah.
you know, you can't
And
diagnose it.
not
That's my point.
and not only that, the constant bills, the peer pressure, entertainment, all these things are pulling at you on all sides. So how could you possibly think about all this?
Exactly. You don't want to be disowned by your parents. You don't want your
Yeah.
dad to be disappointed in you, your
Yeah.
mom, your sister, your brother, your neighbors. You want to get payback at that vindictive ex-girlfriend and show her how amazing. Like, you have all these pressures um, to make something of yourself, and it is a powerful force. It is an incredibly formidable force, because up until 2019, there was a statistic that basically said something to the effect of 85% of university students don't even know why they're there. They're there
Hmm.
just because uh, their parents want them to
Yeah.
be, and they don't even know what they're doing there. They don't even know how the university system even works. They just were blindly following this philosophical script their parents told them was true just because they believed it, and of course they believed it too. So they went, and then 15 years later they'll become, if they're lucky, one of those that realize this really didn't do as much for me, if at all, what I
Hmm.
was told it would. And so all that to say is that people are motivated by their, you know, social pressures. It's this very highly a tight knit, highly efficient machine that actually does a lot of the decision dictating for you
Yeah, yeah.
while getting you to believe that you're making the decisions yourself.
Yeah, and that's the kicker right there. People, just where the humility comes in, people are so brazen and like, yeah, like I'm doing this all on my own free choice. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, to a certain extent, yeah, but it is a big doctored a little bit. Um, but that realization comes with denial in their whole, I wouldn't even call it bravado, I would call it just arrogance
Hmm.
defeats that whole awakening completely.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, with every death, there's a rebirth. And with every realization, there's a choice to make. And with every realization, there's the understanding that things are actually a lot more sophisticated than we gave credit for.
Hmm.
But we choose to believe that things are actually simple. Don't get me wrong, things can be simple, but it's all relative and it's all about what is needed given the specificities of the circumstance that you're in. Some people want to make simple decisions because it's easier to. I mean, you think that the people that literally build multi-million and billion dollar industries did that by being the R word?
Hmm.
You think they went to their executive board meetings and they were like, "Hey guys, can you give me like 3 million trillion billion zillion dollars? Then I'll make something fantastic." No, no. They had to convince the most competent people in that space at that time
Hmm.
whether even worth acknowledging their existence. And it's you can either choose you can choose to look at life however you want because it makes life easier, worth living for you based on where you are mentally at that time. Where it becomes detrimental is if you allow it to interfere with your sleep,
Yeah.
your nervous system, your food, your social life, anything that behooves the homeostatic human condition. And if you can do that in perfect balance and perpetuity with each other, then you're fine.
Hmm.
How do you do that? Is there a limit? We'll find out. Stay tuned after this.
I feel like the worst part of this is that I don't know if this is an American thing or a Western thing, but we have such confidence in being ignorant and being stupid.
Yes.
I think that's the worst part of it. There's
Yeah.
no dialogue. There's just winning debates and this hyper individualism, and I feel like that's the worst aspect of all of this.
Yes, because that is the way that the American system has been built,
Hmm.
or at the very minimum, it's a byproduct. Either way, it's here. And it's here to such a potent degree that it's the defining characteristic by which the rest of the world seems to define us. Now, I will say that I have spoken to many Americans who say that that is true and they agree with it
Hmm.
because coming from a non self hating perspective from their part, not from my part, coming from a non hating perspective, but for them coming from a non self hating perspective, they can observe and acknowledge as Americans that compared to the rest of the world, we are living in such a high state of quality of life that we
Hmm.
have no idea what true suffering is.
Oh yeah.
We don't
Oh,
have the slightest clue.
most definitely.
The only thing, not to be controversial, not like that's stopping us so far, that you could say that was a moment in which modern memory still recalls an event that happened, I might say still recently in the grand scheme of time, was unfortunately what happened on September the 11th, 2001.
Hmm.
Because what it basically did was that it showed the world true violence on the world stage while simultaneously shattering the illusion that the United States was untouchable.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happened, it shattered the illusion that we were untouchable. Notice what I'm saying there. Regardless of what happened, the illusion was shattered.
Yeah.
So, yes, there's this entitlement that permeates every aspect of our day to day existence, culturally, technologically. Would we be able to, again, identify what those individual pieces are and manually choose to filter them out? Is an individual problem, not a collective one. Because you can't tell a group to do something. The individual has to be willing to do it themselves so that when they do it together, the result is collective. But watch, people will hear the word collective and somehow their brain will jump to fascism or socialism, which is not what I'm advocating. It's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about technical, mechanical, and generic terms here. But whatever.
Yeah.